The Washington Commanders deserve a lot of credit for making what had to be the easiest decision of all existing quarterback battles. We got that coming up for you on today's episode of Locked On NFL.
You are Locked On NFL, your daily NFL podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, everybody, and welcome into another episode of Locked On NFL. It's Tuesday, so you've got Luke Braun at Luke Braun NFL on your favorite social media, myself, Ross Jackson, at Ross Jackson Nola, your NFL experts here on the Locked On Podcast Network. On today's episode, we're going to be taking a look at quarterback battles all around the NFL. We'll dive into Pittsburgh's battle between Russell Simmons. Russell Wilson. That might actually be more entertaining if it was Russell Simmons. Russell Wilson and Justin Fields. We'll dive in as well to the Denver Broncos.
Give us some reason to watch the Steelers.
Something going on over there. We'll dive into the Broncos quarterback situation. Sorry.
But not Chris.
Not Chris, though. And then we'll also take a look at Minshew Mania in Sin City. The Las Vegas Raiders have made their decision. We'll explain to you why it was the wrong one. And we're going to take a look at the right decision for the Washington Commanders, with Jayden Daniels being selected as their starting quarterback. We got that coming up for you here as we continue on with this episode of Locked On NFL, your daily podcast breaking down all the biggest stories from around the National Football League, and brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. Boy, they got something real special going on right now. Right now through September 22nd, you put $5 down, you get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Head over to FanDuel.com/locked-on to learn more. All right, so Luke, as we look at the Washington Commanders here, the team has decided, and they have named, Jayden Daniels, number 2 overall selection in the 2024 NFL Draft, their starting quarterback for the 2024 season. This feels like the least surprising yet smartest decision that the Washington Commanders maybe have made in a long time.
I mean, what were they going to do? Start Marcus Mariota?
Right, exactly.
I mean, he's not Desmond Ridder, all right? He's not losing a job to Marcus Mariota.
Right.
No, so this is big for me because I had Jayden Daniels QB1.
Yes.
And actually on Locked On NFL, one of the shows leading up to the draft, I did an episode here with David Harrison, who didn't love Jayden Daniels. So
funny enough.
Put that in your pipe and smoke it. But here's what I liked about Jayden Daniels. For one, you had that sort of the word explosiveness just kept coming to my mind every time I watched all of his tape at LSU, because it wasn't just that he was an explosive threat on the ground.
Right.
Which he is. If LSU ever got a lot of man coverage, he was going to house one from 60. It wasn't quite like Anthony Richardson level of this is melting your face off, but it was still, I mean, that's not a standard you want that's necessarily fair. So there was that explosion, but also just throwing up bombas to Brian Thomas and Malik Neighbors all day.
Right.
You could see an ability not only for that explosiveness, but also to throw, away from defenders instead of 2 receivers. That was a big lesson that I had learned about quarterbacking.
Yeah.
The idea of you're not throwing to open guys, you're throwing to windows and trusting your receivers to chase them down.
Yep.
And that leads to really consistent explosive potential. And that's what excites me about Jayden Daniels, that everything can go explosive. And when everything goes explosive all the time, you can get yourself into a 2nd and 15 because you might pop off a 30-yarder out of nowhere and convert that thing.
Yeah, you can play from behind the sticks a little bit.
It gives you a margin for error, yeah, and makes things so much more comfortable. So if he's ready to go, and I thought I sensed a reasonable amount of pro readiness with him, especially with footwork and stuff, there weren't any huge major changes to his whole vibe that I wanted to make, like I did with Caleb Williams and Drake May, who might also be week 1 starters. Mm-hmm. But Caleb, of course, will be. We'll see about Drake.
Yeah.
But when he if he's ready, he's in. And now you can sort of unlock that explosive potential, and that will keep you in football games while he develops the kind of finer details of his game.
Yeah. Over 1,000 rushing yards as well with the LSU Tigers last year coming out. It's just it makes perfect sense that this was going to be the guy after he was selected. For a little more on this, let's go to our friend David Harrison, who you mentioned earlier, host of Locked On Commanders, who's boots on the ground over at training camp. Here's what he had to say in terms of his update around Jayden Daniels being named the #1 quarterback in Washington.
The Washington Commanders have newly painted practice fields in Ashburn. They've also got a newly made official starting quarterback. This is David Harrison of Locked On Commanders podcast. And on Monday afternoon, we met with Dan Quinn for a press conference, and head coach Dan Quinn opened it up by making official Jayden Daniels will be the starting quarterback for the Washington Commanders when the season kicks off week 1 against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Dan Quinn says that Jayden Daniels has earned the position, but also earned the respect of his teammates with his professionalism and the way he prepares. Jayden Daniels says it's a blessing, and perhaps the biggest part of this is the team only needs him to focus on being the best quarterback he can. Coach Quinn says the time to put on the cape and be the superhero will come, but for now, just focus on continuing to be a great teammate. For more on that and everything Washington Commanders, check out the Locked On Commanders podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Excellent stuff there from David. I love the idea that like this decision to choose Jayden Daniels as their starting quarterback came down to more than just his play, his ability, his potential, but the way that he has operated as a rookie coming into the NFL, having that sense of maturity, having that sense of work ethic. I think these are all things that stood out in his draft evaluation as well. The one place that I do disagree a little bit, though, is this idea that he's got time before he has to put the cape on. I think the cape's got to go on pretty quickly if you're Jayden Daniels.
I guess it depends on like the expectations for, you've got kind of a new setup now in Washington. And so like how much urgency is there when you're probably favored to be third in that division?
Right. But I just expect that with the new starting quarterback, the new offense, the new offensive coordinator, the new head coach, all these other things, that those expectations are going to be pretty high on Jayden Daniels. Typically speaking, the people that put pressure on organizations, i.e. fans, are typically not in a situation where they go, you know what, this is going to take some time to flesh out and to figure things out and all these other things. It's typically that the expectations are very much there, want it now. Now, I think that there are some exceptions. I think everybody looks at the Carolina Panthers as one of those teams, but I think you look at Carolina and you look at Washington, they're in two very different spaces. And honestly, I think that the expectations around Carolina were still a little unfair last year when Bryce Young was initially drafted, that all of a sudden he was going to be the guy to flip the franchise. Now, I didn't believe that, but I think there were a lot of people in Carolina and around Mint Street that did. I imagine that similarly over in the DMV, there will be high levels of expectation for Jayden Daniels and what he does his rookie season. I do think that cape is going to have to go on pretty quickly.
I mean, yeah, it is kind of funny. Like the cape probably goes on when you're down 2 scores in the second quarter and you feel like you have to make a play, but there is something to be said about kind of, relaxing and trying to play, responsible football, keep things on time, keep things in rhythm, like another quarterback we're about to talk to we're about to talk about, which is, just kind of executing the concepts in front of you without trying to do it all in one bite. And that's just good quarterbacking. That's just good general quarterbacking advice. It's got nothing to do with him being a rookie or him being the guy.
Right.
But he is the guy for the Washington Commanders, and he's the guy moving forward. And ideally he's their guy for 15 years. So yeah, that is a mantle you're going to have to get used to sooner or later.
Yeah. Speaking of 15, I am terrified to watch Jayden Daniels go up against a New Orleans Saints defense in week 15. Especially based on what Joshua Dobbs has continued to do. Thank you. I think you were probly like, where'd the 15 come in and all this? It's not only week 15. It's not only week 15. It's literally on December 15th as well. So your pull of 15 was really, really the great way. Yeah, this is all going to go poorly for New Orleans that cannot finish plays at quarterbacks.
At least New Orleans has seen the last of Josh Dobbs probably for the year.
I wish I could say that. We simply don't know.
That's true. We don't know where he'll end up by week 6.
That's right.
So on that though, so we're gonna kind of we're not doing yiking like normal this week because we've got so many QB things to talk about. But I did want to say a yike of the week, which is about the Washington Commanders and Kliff Kingsbury. Apparently, Terry McLaurin has been the left outside wide receiver basically every rep. This is what Kliff Kingsbury did to DeAndre Hopkins to make him completely disappear in Arizona, and he had games where he basically just like ran 5-yard routes all day long. It is an incredibly college thing to do to have that player line up in the same alignment other teams are using alignment as a schematic weapon to get free releases and all that stuff.
Right.
When you line up, when you're that static with your alignments, it can be an obfuscation in and of itself, right? Hey, they're in the same formation every play. We have no idea what play is coming, but it removes so much of your flexibility and so much of somebody like Terry McLaurin, who's scorching people in the slot. Why is that dude not in the slot?
Yes.
Just feels, I don't know, gives me a big yike. And it feels like, oh no, is Jayden Daniels going to have to put up with this to start his career now? What kind of damage is this going to do to his development?
Yeah, not great. We are officially a hashtag free Terry McLaurin podcast. So that's our movement. That is 100% our movement. All right, going next, let's take a look at another quarterback competition that has already been settled. The Las Vegas Raiders making potentially the wrong choice in their quarterback competition. However, we'll tell you why as we continue on with today's episode of Locked On NFL, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Today's episode of Locked On NFL is brought to you by FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. And they're a #1 sportsbook for so many reasons, among which they've got all kinds of specials and cool stuff coming at you all the time. Right now, through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. With a YouTube TV base plan, you'll be able to watch every regular season Sunday afternoon out-of-market game. All you need is a Google account and a current form of payment, but you can cancel anytime, so don't worry about it. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon, download America's #1 sportsbook, and put down $5 on whatever it is that you want, like a season futures win total bet. You can go for the Washington Commanders over under 6.5 wins, depending on how much you believe in Jayden Daniels. Over under 6.5 wins right now. The over is at -120, so the market's kind of hammering it, and maybe you can get in while the getting's good. That is, once again, at FanDuel.com/lockedon for 3 free weeks of NFL Sunday Ticket, assuming you already have a YouTube TV base plan. YouTube and YouTube TV coming together with you. That is, once again, at FanDuel.com/lockedon.
All right, buddy, continuing on with today's episode of Locked On NFL. The Washington Commanders made the right choice, but it might be the wrong choice for the Las Vegas Raiders, who made their decision to go with Gardner Minshew at starting quarterback. We're going to be breaking it down as we continue on. We appreciate you very much for making us your first listen of the day every day here on the show. Don't forget to also go and check out for your second listen today, Locked On Fantasy Football. Michelle Majuk, Vinny Iyer, Monday through Friday, giving you everything that you need. Taking a look at fantasy football for you, helping you become the smartest fantasy football player in your league. Go and check them out wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube as well. Luke, before we dive into this one, let's hear from our good friend, your boy Q, also boots on the ground over in, we were both out in California covering our team's camps. He's back in Las Vegas now, but boots on the ground down in Las Vegas, where this decision was made. We're going to hear a little bit from him, and we'll hear a little bit from head coach Antonio Pierce as well.
When I left Allegiant Stadium on Saturday night, I thought it was going to be Aidan O'Connell. Well, Antonio Pierce, he met with us on Sunday and started the whole press conference off with an opening statement on who's going to be the quarterback. This was AP's decision. Here it is. Check it out.
I'm going to go ahead and start off. Gardner Minshew is going to be the starting quarterback the 2024 season. Myself, Telesco, and Luke Getsy discussed it this morning. A lot of things went into it. It wasn't based off of last night.
So that was the opening statement right there from Antonio Pierce. Gardner Minshew is the starting quarterback, and you heard what he said. It had nothing to do, or it didn't have everything to do with what happened on Saturday night. It was a collective, right? What he saw in OTAs, what they saw in training camp, what they've seen in the games, and just the overall feeling to get this team going in the right direction.
So in the right direction, right? This is what they're talking about. Now, they claim that it didn't have anything to do with his Saturday night performance, which was an excellent performance. But Luke, you have some thoughts on that performance.
Okay, listen, look, okay. So there's a name that popped up that was familiar to me. So, okay, in that game against the Cowboys, which was, all things considered, a very discouraging game for the Raiders. They played a lot more of their starters. They kind of got outplayed by the Dallas Twos. But in that game, Gardner Minshew and the Raiders as a whole hung 111 yards on Andrew Booth Jr., who the Cowboys just acquired from the Minnesota Vikings as an exchange of corners that we were both probably cutting. That's rough. And I've seen a lot of stuff. Can I do a second yike? This tackles narrative. Can we stop going with corners and going and look at all the tackles a corner got? How did they get the tackles? Hey, I've got a question. How did they get the tackles? Where did the tackles come on the field? How did the ball get over there? Do you think maybe they could have prevented that? I don't want my corners getting tackles. I want them breaking up passes.
Yes.
It seems like Booth got totally scorched. Which, I mean, I'd like to give him benefit that he's been in the building for like 2 weeks. What he's struggling a lot. He's going to be a reclamation project for them. Put him on ice. Yeah. But that inflates things. But if we're going to take Antonio Pierce benefit of the doubt, okay, it didn't have to do with that. I still think, at least from what I saw from the two quarterbacks in breaking down their game against the Vikings, it seemed like Aidan O'Connell had the rhythm better. And not unlike what we talked about with Daniels, where it's just delivering the concept and being on time is so powerful in the league.
It's huge. Yep.
I mean, this is West Coast. This is why Joe Montana won 4 Super Bowls, because it was never that flashy, but it was always efficient in where it was supposed to be. Like, I think if you want to call Tom Brady and Joe Montana the two GOATs, then you have to basically admit that this is the most important part of quarterbacking, because those two guys are maybe the most elite two guys to ever do that. Yeah. And I thought Aidan O'Connell did a better job of that than Gardner Minshew did. Gardner Minshew did some interesting improv stuff. He was a little bit more aggressive with the football. I thought he was more accurate with the football. All that stuff matters and is huge. But you can't operate an offense that's constantly behind schedule. And I don't mean behind schedule like the chains. I mean behind schedule like in terms of, fractions of a second in the course of a play. Yep. So I kind of feel like that Minshew maybe has just been kind of dunking on a lot of twos and looking a lot better and getting away with stuff that's not going to fly when you are against the ones. I think that might be particularly inflated. So I am skeptical of this choice. As much as I love Minshew, he belongs in either Jacksonville or Vegas. All right. The vibes are great. For my money, I think that the Raiders are in better shape with O'Connell.
Yeah, I would have to 100% agree with you. I mean, look around the NFL right now. Brock Purdy, very good at running the system in San Francisco. Tua Tagovailoa, very good at running the system in Miami. Now, I understand that each of these quarterbacks is a varying, distinct talent. There's no doubt about that. I understand that. But when we talk about guys that can maximize systems, it's guys that can orchestrate those systems. Gardner Minshew made the mania around Minshew Mania all about what he did outside of structure, because he held onto the ball too long and then had to play hero ball in Jacksonville. And unfortunately, every now and then just figured it out. Then he bounced over at Indianapolis, didn't work there. Now he's landed over in Las Vegas. It's not something that's going to continue to work for him. I think that the Las Vegas Raiders made the wrong decision by appointing Gardner Minshew as their starting quarterback. I felt that Aidan O'Connell, even though he doesn't have the supreme level of talent that might be a starting quarterback in the NFL for years and years and years and years, he can run a system. And I think that that's something that every NFL team needs. Can you drop back and deliver a ball on time? Can you hit a receiver in stride? Do you understand your landmarks of where you're throwing, as opposed to, do you feel the need to create hero opportunities? And I'm not saying that Gardner Minshew purposefully extends plays so he can have these hero highlights, but
no, I mean, it's part of the game and he's better at it. It's part of his game. Mahomes, dog.
Right. Yes. My words exactly. And so the thing that I'm looking at when it comes to the Minshew and O'Connell thing is, who is going to have, and forgive me for kind of going to the overused NFL cliche here, but who is going to have the higher floor? I'm not really worried about the peaks and valleys of what can happen and what you can do by extending a play once or twice a game. I'm worried about, can you get the ball out on time 20 times a game, 15 times a game, right? On target 15 times a game. Can you do that for me? I don't trust that Gardner Minshew can do that. I do trust, though, that Aidan O'Connell, as a young quarterback that is growing in this system, that comes from the program that he came from at Purdue, where he's asked to do very similar things, would be able to do that to greater success, and therefore the Las Vegas Raiders offense to greater success than what it is that Gardner Minshew will eventually do, which is probably end up scrambling himself into bad situations every now and then lofting up some hero balls that are going to end up being intercepted. And that's not the risk reward analysis that you really want to take when it comes to the Las Vegas Raiders right now.
It's funny coming out of Purdue that we're talking about floors and ceilings, because if I were to talk about Aidan O'Connell's ceiling, he had one of the higher ceilings in that class, but was just so unbelievably raw that you couldn't justify spending a top 100 pick on him. But in terms of just raw talent, he was oozing with it. And now we're talking about him as like the safe, responsible, but maybe kind of boring guy, which is kind of funny. And that's the other part of this is like, what's long term? What's the plan for the Raiders? I'm sure Antonio Pierce wants a hand-picked quarterback of his own, and not just the guy that was in the building. Yeah. But in a world where you do develop Aidan O'Connell into a real true blue starter, like I would want to commit to that. Mm-hmm. And I think that he has enough talent to be worth that investment when the other option is a guy that's at best going to be your backup next year to a rookie.
Right. Completely agree. So I don't expect this to go well for the Las Vegas Raiders, but of course we'll keep it locked in with your boy Q over at Locked On Raiders to really see how this goes during the 2024 season. But Gardner Minshew, the starting quarterback over in Las Vegas. So we know what's going on in Vegas. We know what's going on in Washington. So we got a little bit of coast to coast there, but we don't yet know what's going on in Denver, at least at the time of recording this, nor Pittsburgh. So where do we think that they're going? Well, I think Denver should go with what's new and exciting. We'll see if Luke agrees. We'll dive into that next as we continue on and wrap up today's episode of Locked On NFL, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. All right, everybody, wrapping up this episode of Locked On NFL with a look at a couple remaining quarterback battles in this year's NFL off season. There are going to be two that we're going to dive into here. We know some of the other ones. We know what's going on in Vegas. We know what's going on in Washington, even though that wasn't really a quarterback battle. We know what's going on right now in Minnesota, even though, that had to do with some health stuff, of course, with JJ McCarthy. But Pittsburgh and Denver, we don't yet know. Luke, I'd like to start with Denver. Denver undecided between Bo Nix, Jarrett Stidham, as well as Zach Wilson. My opinion on this is that they should go with Bo Nix. My opinion is that they should go with the young, shiny, new, fun player. Do you agree or disagree with that? I'll give you my why here in a moment, but I'm just curious. Are you a Bo Nixer, or do you think they should go elsewhere?
I am not a big Bo Nix guy, I think. I wasn't a big Bo Nix guy coming out just because I saw the limits there to a guy that can just execute a few concepts in rhythm. Because of the variety of those concepts at Oregon, it was very samey. It was a lot of the kind of the same stuff over and over again that college defenses in the Pac-12 are too stupid to figure out. And so Oregon could move the ball and be good, but you kind of saw that he was comfortable with what he had learned, but I would be very concerned if I were going to try to put a different system on his plate and a more aggressive system on his plate than what he did at Oregon. And it seems like the Broncos agree with me, because watching what they've given him in the preseason so far has been a lot of very staple concepts. I think it was before the show. I like the way you put it. That it's concepts you get out of a gumball machine. Stick, Hank. A little slant flat here, that little bit of mesh, like stuff that's in everybody's playbook that you've probably ran a million times before, that, you're not going to struggle with at all. And knowing Sean Payton and knowing how many different kinds of offenses Sean Payton has run, depending on how cooked Drew Brees' arm was at that point in his career, with a fresh Drew Brees in 2009, that was a really aggressive offense. And that is what I kind of thought that he was going to do when Russell Wilson was there, was, cool, moonball time, right? Obviously that didn't work for a bajillion reasons, but Sean Payton's my guy can't throw offense looks a lot like this. Now, I know it's preseason and, you're going to use, but in preseason, you run your base concepts, you run your staples. So what you're running right now is the stuff that you're going to call 6-7 times a game out of different formations and different variants and different ways to get in it to throw defenses off. But this is going to be the backbone of your offense. And if the backbone of your offense is like Hank and stick and maybe a slant here or there and a couple of like keeper, basic keeper floods. Like if that's the backbone of your passing offense, that feels like you're hiding a guy to me. He can execute those concepts in rhythm, and we just talked about how important that is, so you'll be fine. But you're going to be really easy to defend because what you can do variety-wise based off those concepts is way more limited than what you can do off of some stuff that really pushes vertical a little bit more. Post-wheel, these kind of like level Z concepts or mill Z concepts that are like these quarters beaters. Really, we're throwing a lot of like spot routes over the center. And a nice easy 5 yards is great, but you can't build a plane out of it. So add that to the fact that Jarrett Stidham has been clearly with the ones all year. I don't know if I see the vision here, and I don't know if the Broncos are going to go with Bo Nix because I don't know if he's the best quarterback in that room.
That's fair. That's fair. I'm gonna rattle off a couple things that you mentioned: executing concepts and rhythm, comfort in terms of running the same stuff. These were all Bo Nix things. Being comfortable with what he's learned. There's a phrase that I remember Sean Payton using when he was here in New Orleans, and this was particularly popular towards the end of the Drew Brees days, 2017, 18, 19, 20, all still playoff years, but years where you saw the New Orleans Saints offense change and kind of turn into something similar to what you're referencing. A lot of Mills concepts, some dagger concepts here and there when they were feeling really spicy. And when we talk about like these, yeah.
I mean, like these all feel old because they were the thing you did in the 2000s, but like that's
right. And of course, just for people that understand, just to make sure that people understand and are tracking with this too, like what we're talking about here are route combinations, particularly ones that are like two or more different combinations being run on the same side of the field, so that you can
intermediate route combinations.
Yeah.
Like these are not quick game; these are your 2nd and 10 plays.
Yeah, absolutely. And so there was a phrase that he used to say all the time, him and Drew Brees, when they were here in New Orleans. They would say, "Play the songs you know." And it's that very concept right there that makes me feel like Bo Nix is the right choice for Sean Payton. Here's the thing though. Maybe he's not the right choice in 2024. I'd be willing to eat that. Maybe that's a 2025 thing or whatever, but play the songs you know is such a huge part of what it is that Sean Payton has done and what he'll probably continue to do, right? Guys don't typically change everything as they figure out what goes on. Even when they condensed the New Orleans Saints offense a little bit to where it wasn't as much of a downfield attack like you saw in 2011, for instance, which is still the record-holding offense for most offensive yards in a single season, 7,474, in case you're wondering. It's a super easy number to remember because it's just 7,474. And so, but still that offense, what could be seen or seeds of that offense could be seen in what they did later on in Drew Brees' career as the arm started to wear down and all these other things. And so executing concepts and rhythm, throwing to spots, being able to be comfortable with what you've learned, playing the hits, playing the songs that you know, this all feels like what Sean Payton could do with Bo Nix. That's why I think that Bo Nix, even though he is the new shiny toy, and of course still has some development to do, is going to be the right quarterback for Sean Payton to at least get started with at some point, right? And I think that you might as well get started now because there's not really any value in sitting and learning behind Jarrett Stidham.
I don't know if I agree with that about value, but I also think if these are the songs you know, is this the band we want playing the wedding? I don't know.
That's nice. That's nice.
But we should also talk about
the great thing about that's a great thing about a Sean Payton offense, though, is that you're not going for the band. It's just the DJ. Just the DJ. He's just spinning the tracks. But yes. We should get.
Surely we will scheme our way out of this. Nothing bad happened when he did that with Russell Wilson, who now plays for the Steelers and is definitely starting for them. Can we shut up about Justin Fields, please?
Yes. Yeah. Exactly.
Like, oh my God, give it up. This dude is. I haven't watched the entirety of his preseason. Maybe there's a whole bunch of really great plays that I've missed. But boy, have I seen some turds coming out of there. And the reports coming out of camp that like he was pushing Russell Wilson, he has never been close to that on the depth chart for me. Russell Wilson has taken all the first team reps. He didn't play in the second preseason game. Justin Fields did. That implies that Russell Wilson is now. I don't know if there was like a health thing going on there, but like,
sure.
I think he was like a little bit dinged up or whatever, but it still is like this to me, like, we know what QB competitions look like. This ain't one. And it's like Justin Fields does not need to be thrust into another anemic offense. That's not how he develops. Give him some time to heal from what Chicago did to him. Give him a shelter. He is our huddled masses. Let Russell Wilson absorb the body blows for a little bit and let Justin Fields heal. And maybe after a year away from it, where he can just sort of decompress and mature, you might get another version of it. And I'm thinking about that because I'm looking at Sam Darnold, who looks like a totally different version of himself,
right?
Because he had 2 years where he didn't have any pressure on him and he could finally like process everything that he'd gone through and take the lessons he had to take from it.
Yeah, really great point. Yeah, I'm with you on this. I think this is Russell Wilson's team, not Russell Simmons, as I tried to suggest earlier. And even if Justin Fields was pushing a Russell Wilson, then at this point it would feel more like a draw than anything else. And to me, tie goes to the runner. Like, you go to the guy that's got the most experience, and you go with the guy that you know. And I think that that's exactly who Russell Wilson is. So that's an easy choice for me.
I think that's just how it's going to happen. Does that last all year? We'll see what happens when the rubber meets the road.
Great point. Yeah. Things can change later.
I don't think you can justify it based on at least what I've seen of Justin Fields.
Yeah, agreed. And a big part of this whole situation was that Justin Fields would get the opportunity to learn behind Russell Wilson. So give him that opportunity to do that. And as you mentioned, get to process some of the lessons that are there for him from his previous NFL experience. All right, y'all, that's going to wrap us up here for today's episode of Locked In NFL. Really appreciate you being here with us and for making Luke and I your first listen of the day every day. Don't forget to go and check out Locked On Fantasy Football as well. Become the smartest fantasy football player in your league with the daily dose of fantasy football advice every day over at Locked On Fantasy Football. For Luke Braun, I am Ross Jackson. We are the Locked On Podcast Network, and we thank you very much for being here for another episode of Locked On NFL, proud part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.